You may have received a notification that this webinar is being recorded. We are doing our best to make this as transparent as possible, so we would like to also post this on our Staff Assembly Facebook page for some folks who are unable to join us today. This is also a webinar, I should point out, so your camera is not accessed, so feel free to move around. I know that's always a touchy point for me. If folks can see me when I am working from home, if I'm petting my dog or not. So feel free to get up, move around, do whatever it is you need to do. It's my understanding we had more than 250 people sign up for this. So we do want to allow for some folks to join us. We do know that a lot of us are unfortunately overscheduled from time to time. Let's give it 10 more seconds and then let's get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. The very first thing we want to do, though, is a land acknowledgement.
We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luceño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands.
That was provided by Curtis Washington, Senior Mail Processor and Distribution Services, and a very, very good friend of Staff Assembly. Okay, so as I said, welcome to the engagement survey report out. We're going to try to pack a lot into this hour. It's actually 75 minutes. We have booked this from 11 to 12:15. The majority of this time we want to spend with you. We want this to be an opportunity for you to ask your questions. We have invited Interim Chief Human Resources Officer John Stephen Henderson and his team here. They are the experts in a lot of the areas you're going to have the most questions. So the second half of this meeting will be your ability to use the Q&A feature, which is in this webinar, submit your questions, and then vote up or down questions. And again, this is going to be recorded as well, so you can reference it later. The overview, we're going to do a very high-level overview of what an engagement survey is. There's probably some folks on this call who are not familiar with the engagement survey. We'll also provide you an overview of the results, just so you get an idea of how our UCR staff responded to this survey. We're going to talk about strengths because there are some areas where we have improved. There are lots of areas where we have improved, but you'll also see areas for improvement because there are lots of areas where we have improved where, quite honestly, we need to continue to improve to come up to a national average. We're also going to provide written comments because I think there's real power in you reading and seeing the comments that were submitted by our UCR staff. And then lastly, as I said, we're going to do a live Q&A with the HR team. Before we go any further, though, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank the people on this call, the HR team, but also our Vice President, President-elect Agam Patel, who worked very closely with me for this presentation. We're also joined by Melanie Ramiro, our Director of Communications and Marketing, who will be providing links in the chat. Brittany Frazier is the person running the PowerPoint and really behind the scenes, our technical wizard. And Erica Leone is also on this call as well, our Director of Professional Development and an HR business partner for our largest college, CHAS. I also want to thank a few past presidents. So Staff Assembly past presidents, Crystal Petrini, Ross French, Julie Salgado, and Dennis McIver, who provided their insight for engagement surveys in the past. Candidly, I've never done one of these before, so I wanted to make sure that we did this correctly. John Stephen Henderson and Lorena Velasquez from HR and the rest of the HR team, and Vice Chancellor and Chief Diversity Officer Miriam Lamb, who consulted with us on a lot of these results and made sure that we dug a little deeper into the research and to make sure that we communicate to you that staff experiences are not the same across campus. They can differ by ethnicity, gender, age, role, and other categories we're going to go through. And lastly, I just want to remind you, this is your survey data. We're sharing this with you, but in no way are we trying to withhold anything from you. That's why we're having this town hall. It's also why we have released all of this information at staffassembly.ucr.edu. This presentation, which is only 23 slides, but there's a longer version, which is 70 slides. And candidly, I asked our reps at a system level, well, how many slides are there? How much data is there? They gave it all to me. I posted 104 slides on our website. You'll also find frequently asked questions. You'll find other things. I want to make sure that you understand this is our interpretation of what we saw, but you are welcome to review all of the data and provide your own interpretation. We welcome and encourage that conversation. If you would like us to come and talk to your unit or group, we're happy to do so as well. You can reach out to me at jeff.giroux@ucr.edu or at staffassembly@ucr.edu. Remember, this information belongs to all of us. Other items on the website, also, there's a flexible work survey conducted last year by HR and a workforce profile. All right, enough of that. Let's get to it. So every 2 years, the Council of UC Staff Assemblies, you may have heard of it, it's called CUCSA, supports and promotes a UC system-wide survey that is sent to roughly 30% of policy covered staff. Now you may be asking, what about union represented employees? Well, they did not participate in the survey because UC receives their feedback through their union representatives during the collective bargaining process. This survey is very valuable. It's used by all HR teams at all UC campuses and helps provide some information about trends and staff morale. The other thing I'll say is it's 30% of policy covered staff. So you may not have been surveyed. You may also not agree with some of the answers you're going to see. Please just remember, this is supposed to give us an idea of overall how staff responded. All right, moving on to the next slide. I do want to remind you, this is a snapshot in time. So this survey was conducted May 10th to June 9th of last year. So attitudes may have changed. In fact, they probably have. Think about last year, May 10th. Vaccine had just rolled out, but not all of us had received it. Things were pretty much closed at that point. Here at UCR and at the UC system, the budget was a little unsteady. We were still talking about budget cuts. There was a lot of concern among our staff about, if they'd be able to retain their job or keep their job. As an economy, job opportunities at other locations may not be as open and plentiful as they are now. So remember, this is a snapshot in time. And again, this was based on 577 responses from UCR. Your responses may be different, but it's intended to give us a barometer of UCR staff opinions as a whole. You'll see from that graphic, we had 38 opinion items in 13 different topic areas, including 2 wellness questions that are printed there. The stress levels at work are manageable, and how often do financial concerns impact your ability to work? We're going to go through all the questions, and as I said, if there's anything you want to dig deeper in, that data is available on our website right now. Also included this year were 3 open-ended questions. More than 15,000 comments were collected from across the UC. And as I said, we're going to share some direct quotes from our UCR staff at the end of this presentation. The other thing I want to point out is there were 64%, the 64% rate at UCR. That means out of everyone who was invited to take part, 64% took part. That was the highest in the UC system. You folks have a lot of ideas of how we can fix UCR, but you also have some ideas of where we need to start. So I'm very grateful that we have such a dedicated and passionate group of folks working here at UC Riverside. All right, so let's go to the results overview. And there are a few things before we dive into it I want to talk about. As I said, we had the highest participation rate of any UC campus. And here's where I want to start with some good news. The overall trends compared to 2019 are most areas improved. In fact, all but one category improved by a statistically significant margin over 2019. So comparing this survey to 2019, if you just look at the data, the campus as a staff culture has improved. Now, that being said, 9 out of the 13 categories are still below the national average. So even though that we have improved, there is still a significant amount of area for improvement. Now, folks have often said, well, hey, we're public education. It's not fair to compare us to the national averages. And somebody much smarter than me, who I have a lot of respect for in HR, said, no, it is very fair to compare us to the national averages, because that's who we're competing for employees. That's where our folks, if they leave UCR, are going. They're going into private industry. So it is very relevant to compare ourselves to the national averages. All right, going to the next slide. And this is something we talked about earlier when we were thanking Miriam. The experiences by gender and ethnicity vary greatly. And in many cases, unfortunately, our people of color, our women are not having as positive an experience. Talking about retention, many of our early tenure staff, those folks who've been here less than 5 years, are most likely, more than 50%, are most likely to leave and pursue their professional goals at another institution. And then lastly, I want to point out supervisors and managers rated UCR lower in a lot of areas related to organizational change, stress and wellness, and communication with senior leadership. We're not going to get into those slides as much in this presentation, but that longer presentation is available on our website and does dive deeper into those areas. All right, so before we get started, I think it's important for you to understand what you're going to be looking at. So I'm going to give just a very brief 30-second tutorial on how to read these charts. Going from left to right, you will see different categories all the way over on the left: career development, diversity and inclusion, and so on down the row. In the middle, you'll see something that says total favorable score. So for career development, it says 63. That means 63% of the folks who responded gave career development overall, the category, a favorable score. Next to that, you'll see Riverside June 2019, and for career development, you'll see a 5. That means that our total favorable score of 63 in career development is a 5-point increase since June 2019. Next to that is UC overall. For career development, we have a 0, which means we're right in line with UC overall. If you were to go down one to diversity and inclusion, you'll see a -3. That means we are 3 percentage points lower than the UC overall. And then that last category is that category I talked about earlier, the US norm. That is comparing us against every other business and company in the United States. And that's where you'll see some of those numbers turn a little more negative. As I said, the good news is these categories, though low, are still an improvement compared to the 2019 survey. And in some cases, a significant improvement, including organizational change, supervision, communication, and empowered culture. All right, category by breakdown. You'll see the responses vary by gender, and you'll see some categories are slightly lower for respondents identifying as female, but others were lower for respondents identifying as male. You'll also see a greater disparity in those that declined to state, which included 15 people in total. But 15 out of 57 is not a very large sample size, which may explain why some of that data seems, in this case, significantly lower. And here's a slide that I encourage you to spend some more time on after this presentation to really see what's going on. Here's the same categories by ethnicity. And some of the numbers are much more stark. There are 3 negative categories in the column of respondents who identified as Asian, and then it gets even less positive for Black, African American, Hispanic, and 2 or more races. In particular, we want to call out the -17 in Black African American respondents for the diversity and inclusion category. Even lower is the 2 or more races column in the categories of communication, leadership, and wellness. It's important to remember that these answers are not hitting everyone the same way, that based on who you are, based on your ethnicity and to your genders to some extent, you are having a very different experience here at UCR. And a lot of the work we need to do needs to focus on this area and how we start to rectify some of these numbers that are incredibly stark and telling. All right, category by tenure. Here's the breakdown by tenure. Pay particular attention to the 3 to 5 category, which is significantly negative in relation to the rest of the columns. What's interesting is you'll see the experience seems to improve from 5 to 10 years, and then gradually decrease again, 10 to 15, and 15 to 20, before improving again in the 20 to 25 range. From this graph, it would appear we are most likely to lose our staff who have been at UCR between 3 and 5 years. There are specific questions, questions like, are you able to fulfill your professional goals here at UC Riverside? Well, the folks 3 to 5 years had the most negative answer. We need to ask ourselves why that is and how we can reverse those numbers. 4 areas that we should possibly look at based on these numbers are performance management, retention, wellness, engagement, and leadership. This is the second page of tenure, and this is interesting. Only 12 respondents fell into the category of 30 plus years, but it is by far the most negative category for responses with numbers in the negative 20s, including retention, diversity, inclusion, and empowered culture. Again, it's important to remember it's a very, very small sample size of only 12 respondents, but it is something that we thought was statistically significant that we should share with you. And now I'm going to turn this over to Vice President, President-elect Agam Patel, who's going to dig deeper into our strengths and weaknesses.
Thank you, Jeff. So we don't want to dismiss that 12 out of the 13 categories improved from the 2019 survey, including organizational change and innovation, up 12 points, empowered culture and communication, up 10, as well as supervision and communication, up 10 points each. In terms of the overall score, we scored high in the areas of supervision, working relationships, and image brand. So moving on to the next slide, let's dig a little deeper into some of these strength areas. Here were the highest scoring answers in the survey. On the first question of image brand, you'll note that staff have an overall positive experience with the UC system. And also, as noted on the second question, staff have an overall positive relationship with their supervisors. It's important to bear in mind here when staff took this survey, which was last May, and in the middle of a global and deadly pandemic. At the time, the UC budget was in doubt and folks were worried about their jobs. New forms of technology fostered better communication, and there's probably a silver lining to those modified and remote work environments, which we should take with us post-pandemic as we consider the future of work. If we go down the list a little bit more, we also rated favorably in working relationships and wellness, where there was good cooperation between staff and departments, and supervisors were supportive of staff participating in health and wellness related activities. All right, let's look at the next slide. The question about the supervisor treating me with respect, which scored a whopping 91% favorable and is 3 percentage points higher than the US norm, which means that you are more likely to have a supervisor at UCR that treats you with respect and courtesy than anywhere else in the US. Let's look at the question below that, which talks about the belief in the UC mission. A 93% favorable rating and 3 percentage points higher than the US norm. All good things. And the last one, which asks if the campus does an excellent job of keeping employees informed about important matters, is notable because it went up 14 percentage points from the 2019 survey and 10 percentage points above the US norm. But 4 percentage points below the UC norm. So a bit of a mixed bag here. All right, so for the next slide, now for the not so good news on this particular slide. Despite the increases in our scores, we still scored low in 9 out of the 13 categories. Chief amongst them were leadership, performance management, and retention. Retention is something we're all witnessing in all of our departments, including in this survey. And it is possible that people are more likely to leave UCR now because of the UC budget, because of how the UC budget has stabilized. The economy is doing a little bit better and people are exploring new opportunities. In terms of areas of development, these are the three categories of growth that Staff Assembly is working on with HR and senior leadership to offer more opportunities in performance management and career development. A good example of this is where currently a few former Staff Assembly presidents are working on a new revised version of the performance appraisal form that is being beta tested with a group of about 100 staff members. Staff Assembly, along with HR and Lead, is also hosting the second annual Professional Development Conference in exactly just about 2 weeks, where we will be offering over 23 different sessions for professional development over the course of 2 days, all hosted by staff for staff. On this next slide, we'll look at some of the least favorable responses. So let's start with the middle one first, which asks about matching pay to performance. This shows that only 36% agree that this is true, which means that 64% of our staff think that they are not getting paid enough. Again, this goes back to retention. We won't be able to keep our talent here if we don't pay them well enough. This also brings up questions about work-life balance. And if we cannot offer a competitive salary, how else are we incentivizing staff to stay? It could be we need to seriously consider incentives like flexible and remote work and additional professional development opportunities. And still on this second question, it's also worth mentioning here that we cannot call ourselves an employer of choice if we are 15 percentage points below the US norm. All right, let's look at the first question where we have a problem of reputation as it relates to the overall UC brand, scoring 13 percentage points below the overall UC and 8 percentage points below the US norm. And on the last question on this slide shows you that 33% of our staff don't think that their career objectives can be met within the UC system. And as pointed out in the slides earlier, the category of staff that don't think that they can achieve their career objectives are the ones that have been here with us for less than 5 years. All right, on the next slide, we'll look at some of the lowest scoring questions. And by far, the lowest one is related to salary. Only 36% feel that our campus does a good job of matching pay to performance. Looking at the next one, which is related to employee wellness, more than half of our staff say that financial concerns are impacting their ability to work. Again, Staff Assembly is taking the lead here and is working with basic needs. Over the last several weeks, we've hosted pop-up pantries every 2 weeks where we have upwards of 180 staff members per event that get bags of free produce and groceries. The next question below, which is still related to wellness, nearly half of our folks, 47% to be exact, feel that stress levels are not manageable at work. That's a big number. And finally, as we touched on earlier, retention is in the 50s, which tells us that folks are actively considering leaving the UC. And with that, I'll pass it back on to Jeff.
Thanks, Agam. All right, so we're going to go to the next few slides, and this is where we get more into what our UCR staff said themselves. And let's start with this slide. Please select the most important reason you are considering leaving the UC system. This is from Willis Towers Watson, the folks who conducted the survey. 31%, nearly 1/3, said salary is the main reason they're considering leaving. They're paid lower than market value. They're working in the wrong job description. Cost of living is rising higher than pay increases. And most troubling is that last bullet point in the far left category, racism is cited as a reason why some UCR staff are not receiving equitable pay or opportunities. Career advancement opportunities also receive 12% as far as the reasons people are considering leaving. No clear path to promotion and job opportunities are frequently filled with external candidates. There's a culture of not promoting from within. We're not rewarding and promoting our talented people. In fact, Staff Assembly has already begun conversations with HR about ways we can encourage internal promotion in ways that don't necessarily require an external or even national search. I think one of our former Staff Assembly presidents, Ross French, said it best. He said, in order to stay at UCR, you still have to get promoted into another department. And so we want to find ways so that our talented people can stay in their department if that's what they so choose. That last category, work-life balance, 9%. I think that directly ties to some of those other conversations we've been having about flexible scheduling, about remote and hybrid work. But work-life balance is something we as a campus will need to have a much longer conversation on. And some of that scheduling may be an opportunity for us to solve some of those issues. All right, let's move on to the open-ended questions. These were the 3 questions that were added to the survey for 2021. First question was, please select the most important reason you are considering leaving the UC system. And you will see that salary is by far the biggest reason for leaving. And there's a couple of quotes that were added on this slide. Again, this is from Willis Towers Watson. This isn't something that we created. This is something that the survey company provided to us. The quote is, my job is underpaid in comparison to all other regional universities and community colleges. A second one is, I am in a role where there is nowhere to move. The possibility of being promoted within my job is also slim. You'll see other categories in there: career advancement, 12%, work-life balance, 9%, working environment, 9%, and it goes on from there. But those are the most important reasons people are thinking of leaving. Let's go to open-ended question number 2. What's 1 or 2 suggestions you have that would most improve your campus location as a place to work? UC Riverside received 350 comments. They followed a consistent theme: increase staffing and resources, improve culture to align with university values, desire for a flexible work options, better pay, recognition to help retain employees, more transparency from senior leaders, and clear communication from our leaders. Actual quotes: we need to hold faculty and staff accountable to our values. I see a great deal of disrespectful behavior that should never be tolerated. Higher salaries for all employees. It is hard to attract high quality candidates when they are making way more than UC can offer. And transparency is something regularly talked about but not practiced. People do not know what is going on, and this causes a great deal of fear and anxiety. Let's go to our last open-ended question. How can we best address the challenges that we are facing right now to keep working effectively? And here's where we talk about flexible work again. Let employees decide how and where to work. Hire more staff. Provide appropriate funding. Manage programs around staff availability. Clear and consistent communication from leadership. This is the second slide we've heard that we need to address communication from senior leadership. And transparency. Listen to employees. Actual quotes: allow for flexibility regarding working hybrid in a way that is beneficial to students and staff. Here's something about under-resourced. Staff are overtasked and under-resourced. Responsibilities and expectations continue to grow while resources shrink. And lastly, clear communication from leadership about expectations and priorities. So you've heard a lot of kind of a negative reaction, but we also want to focus on some of the positive things that Staff Assembly is working with senior leadership and HR, LEAD, AMP, other campus partners to really address some of what we're seeing. Because again, I'm staff, everyone on this call is staff. We love UCR. We want to find ways to support you and to really grow this institution. So we've been working with UC Riverside's Human Resources for, going on 2 years to expand our remote work resources. And thanks to talented folks like Leila Dennis and John Stephen Henderson, those and Lorena Velasquez, those resources are available. If you go to that link right there at hr.ucr.edu, you'll be able to see some of those things. And they include a remote work guidelines and agreement you can sign with your supervisor. As Agam talked about earlier, we have former staff assembly presidents who are not retired. In fact, Sue Anderson, who used to work in HR and for all intents and purposes is retired, came out of retirement to really help lead that discussion with HR. And with HR, they are already beta testing a group of over 100 staff employees. I'm in that group as well, to reimagine our performance evaluation form. So we're excited about that. Hopefully you've already taken part of our Highlander Mentor Connection. It's our first staff-to-staff peer mentor program offered during fall and spring quarters. We've just started our second cohort, but you can find out more about that on the HR website as well. Enhanced professional development. You know, we were fortunate enough to get over $1 million in federal funding, and some of that went directly to HR. So HR has used that federal funding for an instructional designer, Skillsoft e-courses, training material, staff certifications, and the staff conference. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the staff conference in a second. And you may be aware of this, but we're also undergoing an external assessment of human resources. So we've partnered with another company called Deloitte, which has talked to over 290 stakeholders. And those recommendations will be shared with you. They've already been shared with campus leadership about ways that we can strengthen and build out our human resources. Human resources, just like almost a lot of other places on campus, needs more people, needs more funding, needs more resources. So we're gonna get to have a longer conversation about how ways we can strengthen and support our human resources team. And then lastly, I want to make sure that I put on your radar, if it's not already, our staff conference on March 22nd and 23rd. It is going to be fantastic. I am so excited for this. This is for you. It's only the second staff conference UCR has ever done. It's going to include keynote speakers, inspirational speaker Shola Richards, and Provost Elizabeth Watkins, who has been a strong supporter of staff. She spoke at our General Assembly meeting just last week. It also has free downloadable resume templates for all conference attendees. That's a $50 value from, and don't laugh, a leading resume service called Let's Eat Grandma. But they are one of the leading resume services. You will be able to download those templates and the cover letter templates and get started. We're also, and I'm excited about this, we're doing signups for professional headshots. So we know it's been a couple of years. I don't know about you, I was cutting my own hair there for a while. But this is an opportunity to refresh your professional headshot. Staff assembly and using some of that federal funding is helping to pay for that. So we are offering several days with a professional photographer who works here on campus. And please sign up for that. A professional headshot can make all the difference for you. You can find out more about this at crowdcast.io/UCR staff conference. And again, before we turn it over to the Q&A, I just want to say, if this is a snapshot in time, this has been our interpretation of what we've seen working in concert with a lot of different stakeholders and experts in different areas. But all of that data is available to you. Please, I encourage you, go to staffassembly.ucr.edu and feel free, reach out to me if you want to have a longer conversation about this. We can either set up a formal presentation to your unit or org, or you are welcome to challenge any of the things we've presented, because this is as transparent as possible. In every single piece of data we've uploaded, because we want to make sure you have that. And with that, I want to invite Agam Patel back on and Erica Leon, who are going to help to moderate the session with human resources. As we said, please use that Q&A feature, put your questions in, any questions you may have, and you also have the opportunity to vote up or down those questions. We have 197% participants on the call. We know how busy you all are. This is going to be the end of my portion, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time and your interest. We love working with you all.
Thank you, Jeff. So this is your turn to ask questions. We want to invite John Stephen Henderson and team, who have graciously agreed to be a part of this, to help answer some of these questions related to HR. And so if you are here, John Stephen, Lila, etc., feel free to join in. But I'll get things started, and I want to remind folks to pop your questions into the Q&A feed. But the first question, John, Stephen, that we got within the registration and also here today in the chat is about staff turnover and retention. What is UCR doing to help retain staff, and why do we have this turnover issue?
Great, thanks for the question. Actually, I was trying to turn my video on, but for some reason I can't, so forgive me for that. I keep on getting a message that says it's stopped. So I guess I'll just be the voice in the sky. It's not that I was, unlike Jeff, I don't really have any hair to cut. So I didn't do that. So it's not because of my hair, but anyway, oh, there I am. I showed up. I don't know how that happened, but did you do something?
I just made you a co-host.
Okay, thanks. So as you see,
Good to see you.
Great. So let me say the turnover is not just a UCR problem. It is a national problem. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the Great Resignation, and we're seeing those all over the place. It's people are leaving their jobs, and it's super hard right now in order to just attract or retain anyone. So it is something else that we're looking at. I know one of the things that we've been very actively doing is really extending flexible work as much as we possibly can, because we know one of the reasons that people have said they've been leaving is because, why would I work here if I can actually work from my home for somebody else? So that's one of the things that we've really been really working with leadership with, to actually make sure that we're keeping those programs as viable as possible. At some point, I hope we get like some permanent commitments to actually just do it kind of like a forever thing, but we're not quite there yet. But we know that we're going to have to be flexible well into the future. It's not just during the pandemic time, but it's also going to be after. There are other things, that we're looking at. I'll say on the recruiting front too, we're actually hiring additional recruiters to actually help bring people in, because we know what happens when people leave. It puts more pressure, on the people that are still remaining here to actually have to not only do their job, but actually pick up the work from somebody else, that leads to burnout and those other types of things. So we've been trying to put together, and actually using part of our HERF funds and other funds, trying to do more stress relievers for employees. We've been talking about things from, I can't remember, the goat farm, goat yoga or something has even been discussed, but trying to do things where we can actually, again, partner with, you all and staff assembly to try to figure out what some of those relief efforts are that we can do to actually help mental health side of things. I'm trying to think, we've done something else too. One of the things that we're still doing and we're still looking at, and we just completed another cycle of a biannual equity increase process, where we actually have been trying to, on a large scale, look at people and actually trying to actually bring them up to market a little bit at a time. Again, one of the things I can't stress enough is that, we're a public employer, and we don't necessarily always get the type of funding that we would like to actually fix everyone's salary issues. And I know that's something that everybody talks about. You saw 36% of the people don't think that we're actually really effectively doing that. And that's a hit. And we know that's a hit. And it's, we can only cry so much that we don't have the budget, but we are actually actively trying it. So when we went to the biannual equity increase process, that I can't remember the number, I'm not sure if Deb or Scott are on that, but the number of people that we were able to actually bring up some has really helped. And we're going to continue those types of efforts, because again, we know that's critical to everything. This year, what the president of the system has proposed is I think it's a 4.5% across the board increase for all staff. Again, that's not approved yet. That's what he actually got. He took to the regents back in, I guess that was last month, either in February or January, I can't remember which one, to actually get people larger salary increases than what they've normally been getting in the terms of that 3% range has been the typical budget. We moved it up to 4.5% this year. Again, it doesn't get us all the way there. Depending on what source that you look at, cost of living, has gone up by about, and this is always a walking number a little bit. I follow AARPs usually more than everybody else's, just because they have an incentive themselves to actually make it a little bit higher than what they're really seeing that is. So they round up, and they actually said it's 5.9% this year for 2021. Which is a pretty startling number. That's the highest since 2008, when it was 5.8%. And remember, in 2008, we had the big implosion of the housing market and that blew. So we are trying to do things to get more creative with salary. Absolutely. Another one of those things that we're really trying to push too is more internal movement within UCR. Traditionally, we've been one of the better campuses actually with internal movement where people move from one unit to a different unit to a different unit within UCR. And we've been actually, we're continuing those efforts too. One of the things that it does allow for is some internal movement upwards. But again, I don't think there's ever enough of that. So even if you see 4 or 5, 6 of your peers get promoted over time, it doesn't actually happen every single time. But we are actively looking at that too, about how can we create more of those opportunities where it makes sense, with different professional development programs by Leela's team, different recruiting initiatives with Sinclair's team. So we are working on all these types of things. Long answer, but hopefully that helped.
Thank you so much, JS. That was very helpful. I'm going to the next question in our Q&A, and this is probably going to be for you as well, since it falls under employee and labor. So this is somewhat of a question, somewhat of a comment. Appreciate the comment concerning the reason collective bargaining covered staff aren't included in this survey, but once every 5 years for negotiations, and that whole process isn't really feedback. So that is the comment. I believe they're just wanting some more feedback on opportunities for feedback and what that looks like.
What do you mean, opportunities for feedback from, you mean from the bargaining unit folks?
Since the bargaining unit folks were not part of this survey, and they have a different process, what types of avenues can the bargaining unit folks take to give feedback about their work environments and any concerns that they may have?
Great. So every year, or twice a year, maybe even, there's a, I can't remember the exact term for it, but there's actually a luncheon at the chancellor's house, or we'll do it virtually for the people that don't want to be there, with the union stewards of each of the unions. And actually, I think that's coming up, I can't remember, like within the next month. It's actually scheduled as the next one. I'm not sure. Is George on? He would probably know the exact date. I don't see him on, so I can get that. But we actually do a annual, or I can't remember if it's annually or twice a year with that group. And they give us a lot of the concerns from the bargaining unit perspective. So we do get those kinds of meetings twice a year or once a year with them. And, at that meeting is, our head of employee and labor relations. I'll be showing up. We have Jerry Bomati showing up, the vice chancellor, planning business administration, as well as the chancellor, Christine Victorino. So others like that. So it's senior leadership as well as HR. And we're all there to listen directly to that group. And that happens at least once a year. I just can't remember the date and the timing of it, but I know the next one's coming up. So one way to get your feedback is talking to your reps, your representatives, if you're in the bargaining unit. Also, you're right, every 4 or 5 years, a new bargaining unit contract comes up, and they bring up everything under the sun in those meetings about what we've been doing well or what we haven't been doing well. Usually, obviously, it focuses on what we have not been doing well to try to make adjustments there. So that's what we actually try to pay attention to as well. Obviously, through the process with employee and labor relations, as we actually get more information, and you'd be surprised, not UCR folks are not shy about sharing information with us half the time. So that comes up again too, and we listen to it in those meetings, and then we try to respond the best we can. Again, one of the advantages of having a bargaining unit contract sometimes is that it's a very formal way to actually get change and see where that change is. One of the disadvantages of it is it sometimes handcuffs us for a few years until the next one comes up, until we can really change things to work for that advantage. Did that answer the question? I'm hoping. And then I thought I just saw a comment from Jerry.
Thank you, JS. One of the other questions that keeps popping up is about promotions from within UCR. And why is it so difficult for UCR departments to promote from within? And what is HR doing to help expedite some of these and encourage department managers, supervisors, leadership to actually look at the talent that is here and keep them engaged and keep promoting versus having them leave UCR?
Right. This is one that puzzles me, honestly, a little bit. As I said, that UCR has regularly for the past several years led the UC, at least in terms of internal promotions or internal movement. I think maybe there's a definitional thing about what is a promotion. So, I think what people think of traditional promotion is you're in job X and I say, Agam, you know what? You're great. I'm now going to make you supervisor over job X. Agam, you're even better. I'm now going to make you manager over the entire department. Wow, Agam, you're great. You're going to be the director. And you know what? The next thing we do, we just move you into vice chancellor. That would be a great thing in terms of promotions. I think, I can't remember, it was either Jeff or Ross said something to me, a couple months ago about they've moved 5 or 6 different times, but they never thought they got promoted. And I think what it is I think the first thing, we are a public employer. The state of California has their expectations of us, as well as the office of the president and the regions have their expectations of us. And that's, and I don't know how to say this more succinctly, but in the eyes of UCOP, every time someone moves from job X to job Y should be through a competitive recruitment. So they don't believe necessarily in just moving people. They want everything to be a competitive recruitment. The reason for that is to actually give everyone a fair chance to get that next step up. So one of the things that happens a lot of times with we're in the compensation team, we'll get a request for a promotion or a request for a reclassification, and we need to assess over in that team, does this job really change organically? And does it just make sense that this person's job growth has just actually moved that way? And then we'll do a reclassification. So it doesn't count as a quote unquote promotion. We have instituted 2 years ago, I believe it was, a new internal promotion process where we can say, hey, we're just going to look for people internally to UCR. And we want to say, and we're going to limit it to, to this group of people. That way we force ourselves, or quote unquote, force ourselves into finding an internal person to actually apply for the next job versus even going outside of UCR. So we have been using that a lot more in the last 2 years. And another thing that we've been doing is a direct promotion, where what we said is, hey, there are certain reasons about this job that the person needs to be a current person of UCR, and they need to have certain UCR knowledge that we could only use someone from UCR. And we'll say, it's not an open recruitment from the standpoint of we're just posting the job, but we'll say, we'll look at the 8 people within this division that actually are in line for that next job up. We'll do a review of those people, what are their background skills, and we'll say, hey, the most highly qualified person is this person, and that's the one we may select through an internal process. Again, and that comes with controversy sometimes. Obviously, if somebody else is selected and it wasn't you, and you feel like, hey, shouldn't I have been selected? And you didn't get that opportunity to compete, that becomes problematic. So that's not the way we prefer to do things, because again, the general expectation is an open recruitment for everything. So we do our best to really kind of play with that. But in terms of internal movement, I can't stress enough, we have led the UC for several years in a row about the most internal movement in terms of upward positions. It just may not necessarily be stated as a promotion all the time.
Thank you, JS. The next question is very much related to what you just spoke on. So the question is, why is it so hard to promote within a job/unit? So I think maybe if you could just elaborate, I think this may be a communication gap of what options are available and out there, or any additional thoughts you have on this topic?
I don't know if I have additional or new. Again, open recruitment is the way that the UC wants us to do it. There are people that have received reclassifications. And I say, I don't have the metrics in front of me. Again, if Deborah Scott are out there, you can put it out there in terms of, do we know how many reclassifications we've done, upward reclassifications? But we do a ton of promoting or a ton of recruiting from within UCR and those people getting the next level up. So I'm not sure, maybe it's just a term promotion. It doesn't necessarily feel like it if you have to still apply. And I totally get that. But that is really what the state expects from us, as well as the Board of Regents of the UC and UCOP really expects from us, is to going through that process. For again, it's an equity thing. More people should be able to compete for those positions, and that's what we try to do.
Thank you, Jeff. So shifting gears about hybrid work, we've got a question here about what if my department or division is not being flexible with home or hybrid options? What is leadership doing, and how are we holding them accountable when employees are not being offered this remote work option?
Perfect. So again, we really try to, I'm not going to say push, that's probably too strong of a word, but encourage departments, managers to actually have their people work remote if that work can be done remotely. Obviously, there's a lot of people, if you have to touch anything that's actually physically here, if it's an animal, or if it's some kind of piece of equipment because you're maintaining certain things, if it's a food item, groundskeeping, there's certain positions that we know cannot be done remotely. But then there's those positions that are in this gray area where we think they can be, but maybe not. And we really try to encourage and try to help people re-envision how it can be done. And we've actually, Alex and Leela over in our EOD area have, developed several training classes about how you can reimagine some of that work. And I think somebody mentioned it already in terms of how could it be done remotely or at least on a hybrid basis. So we actually are trying to push that. We're trying to push it with leadership, including the cabinet and all the way down. But, the reality is that change can be difficult for a lot of people to accept. So I don't want to ever, throw that and say, nah, everybody can do it, no problem. But change is difficult. And I know, specifically, Jerry Bomati himself have actually talked to a couple of deans, maybe even the vice chancellor. I can't remember if it was a vice chancellor or not, about exactly this, about, hey, you really need to allow your people to work remote. It doesn't make sense, and encouraging them too. So we've taken it as high as we can in terms of really pushing for it. But, everybody has their pace of, are you going to be, what is it called? The quick adapter to the new environment, or some people a little bit slower. And we're still seeing some slower adapters to this new environment, but we're still trying to pursue it as much as we can.
So just a quick follow up on that, JS. Is there a mechanism in place for those folks who feel that their voices are not heard and their supervisors or department managers are not giving them the flexibility, even though their job description may not warrant that they be on campus? Is there a mechanism in place? Is there a point of contact? But also keeping in mind that we don't want to have any retaliation and maintain privacy. So is there a mechanism in place that you can allude to, or a contact, or
I would say
like
actually talk to your human resources partner within your area. That's usually the first line of communication, because they can actually, either A, they can actually understand what's happening or actually try to do a diagnosis of what's going on, or B, sometimes they may come actually to Central Human Resources for additional support and help that we may actually want to, figure out again, more indirectly too. But, anytime an employee brings something up, the first thing we say, there should be no retaliation. I know that's easier said than done, and some people may still feel it, but we do try to protect people as much as physically possible to make sure that's not happening.
Thank you, JS. And speaking as one of the HRBPs for one of our colleges, I think it's really important to open the lines of communication. Just to piggyback on what you said, sometimes it's just asking that question. I saw a comment in the chat about, not just working remote and hybrid, but potentially having maybe 980 work schedules or 4 10-hour shifts throughout the week rather than 5 8-hour shifts, what that looks like. So sometimes, again, I know it can be scary, but just having those conversations with your HRBP or your supervisor, that can be a start to moving forward in a more positive direction. So next question for you, and this is for our senior leadership. It's related to the hybrid and the remote work. What would the campus do to address inequalities in jobs, considering those who come to campus incurring great personal costs to work, such as commuting, parking, time, etc., versus those who work part-time or full-time from home?
Wow. Can you repeat the question one more time? I need to get my head around that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. What would the campus do to address inequalities in jobs, considering those who come to campus and incur great personal costs to working, such as commuting costs, parking costs, and time, versus those who work part-time or full-time from home?
Got it. So I'd say there's a difference between equal and equitable. And what we really try to do is make sure that we're being as equitable as possible when it comes to those types of things. So for example, equal of treating everybody the exact same way is not something we can really do, because like I said, there are certain jobs, certain positions that really do necessitate being on campus. I don't know how to say it any simpler than that. If you have to be in a lab to take care of animals, you need to be here to physically do it. Certain type of research is only something that you can do in a lab or in our physical location. If there are ways that we can actually shift those people a little bit, and maybe, certain people are in certain days, different people are in different days, to actually do more of a hybrid where they can actually alternate those schedules, as you alluded to, or even 4x10s or something, we would try to push and accept that. But, we wouldn't want to force, quote unquote, force people that can do their jobs 100% remote, from their home every day, to come in just to be the same as some of the folks that are coming in every day. But how do we show, and I think part of it is really, how do we show some of those people that are coming in every day some appreciation? I know that it's funny, just the other day, I was actually talking to Jerry Bomati, and he was talking about how he and Kim Wilcox, the chancellor, had walked through a certain couple of units just to say hi to people and let them know that they were here with them, to actually do some appreciation for them. I think sometimes those types of things really matter. If I have people that are actually working on campus, which nobody on my team does right now, but I've been onto campus a couple of times, not because I had to go, but just to kind of say hi and show up for them as well. But in terms of trying to put special programs directly for those people, we don't have anything like that yet, but we're looking at some things. I think Stanford just did something pretty innovative. I'm not sure if people saw that in the news or not, with what they're doing for the people that are working on campus 100% of the time. And I think they just did something like, we're giving those people an extra, I can't remember, $150, a week, because they are coming in every time. Not saying that we're going to do that. That would need actually presidential approval. But there are different things that we are looking at to see if it makes sense for us to do at either the UC level all the way down, or can we do certain things at the UCR level.
Thank you, JS. One of the other questions that popped up earlier was, when will staff get to see the data that was shared earlier from the HR consult?
Oh, the Deloitte data. So that's actually on the website right now. So if you go to UCR, hr.ucr.edu, in the top left-hand corner, it'll say resources. And if you do that resources click down, the very first thing will actually say, I can't remember what it says, this Deloitte study. I'm not sure if somebody can, if you're following what I'm saying, somebody could put it into the chat so that everyone can see it. So it is posted on our website right now, where people can go and look at what the feedback was. And Jacob did it. Perfect. I think that's it. Yeah, UCR HR operational assessment, that's it. Thank you, Jacob, for that. So actually, that means my memory was at least pretty accurate once. Great.
Thank you, JS. Great job. Another question coming up regarding salary, and this may even be something that maybe Scott or Deb want to weigh in from compensation. Could John Stephen address the disconnect between HR's perception of UCR's high rate of internal promotion compared to staff's perception of not being able to move up within their units, departments, and schools?
You want to put Deb and Scott on, and they can respond, and I can back them up if necessary. Not to put anybody on the spot, Deb and Scott, but I saw you were on here.
Hi there, this is Deb. I know Scott's on too. Could you repeat the question? I didn't quite hear what the question was.
Sure. Could you address the disconnect between HR's perception of UCR's high rate of internal promotions compared to staff's perception of not being able to move up within their units?
That is a tricky question because it helps to understand what the disconnect is about. Is it that there seems like there's opportunity for reclassification for some versus there's not enough job openings? So I guess I'm still confused about what we're looking for here.
I think the way I'm interpreting the question, and maybe I'm wrong, is that staff doesn't believe or doesn't necessarily feel that there's very many opportunities to move up, either through reclass, a new job, a promotion, whatever it may be, where staff is like, we don't have these opportunities. But what I say, and what, is that, hey, comp's really busy doing a lot of these reclassifications and, working on internal promotions and those types of things. So I think that's where the disconnect is. But my own answer would be like, promotion in terms of the traditional sense that we just move you from a analyst 1 to an analyst 2 or an analyst 2 to the 3 or 3 to a 4. That doesn't necessarily exist a lot in terms of that old school promotion style, but there's still a ton of movement is what I would say.
Right, and I think you had touched on working with your HR business partners as well when you were speaking to that, because there could be some misunderstanding about what is the approach or what's the organizational culture around getting promotions and looking at your job classification and making sure that it is in the right place.
I'd also say that, sometimes when we get a request for a, say an internal promotion or for a reclass, not 100% of those get approved. A large percentage too. I don't know the percentage numbers in front of me, but I think sometimes what happens when someone doesn't get that reclass, they tell 50 other people. When the person does get the reclass, they may tell 2 or 3. So I think sometimes the negative is disproportionately talked about versus the positive, and I think sometimes that may be impacting that general perception, because the data says something very different. It says we do this a lot.
Sure, and I agree with that. And I think there also might be a recency situation with COVID, because as a comp analyst, and I know Scott will agree with this, when we went through COVID in the beginning, a lot of organizations put quite a bit of brakes on looking at reclassification and looking at recruitments, trying to determine where the dust was going to settle with COVID and budgeting. And so I feel like there was like this big point in time for at least a year where things seemed to really stop. And so it might also be playing into this notion of less opportunity available.
I can chime in quickly here too. I think some of this does come down to what people's perceptions of promotions are. I think that the information that we have a lot of internal movement compared to other UC campuses is not necessarily what you would consider to be a promotion from like analyst 2 to analyst 3, for example, but is internal movement that is driven by folks, throwing their hats in maybe a different department where they don't work right now. And I have seen a lot of folks that have moved, through the ranks by taking that approach and being a little bit more willing to get out of their comfort zone and get into another department for those opportunities.
Great, thank you, Scott and Deb, for your input as well. So we've got another question coming in here. The pop-up food pantries that Staff Assembly has taken the lead on has been a great help for a lot of our staff here. What is leadership doing to address this need? And are they paying attention to the dire need of staff that are employed here at the University of California, but are still in need of staff pantry pop-ups?
That's interesting. So about leadership supports those pantries, of course. So they couldn't happen unless they get approved. So that's an easy portion of it. But I think that outside of those pantries, leadership has been very concerned, honestly, about what we can do to better support, our, actually faculty, staff, and students around, food. Food items has been a very strong thing for us. Again, it gets back to we applied for her funding so that we can do additional support for our faculty, staff, and as well. I don't think it actually responds to students. I don't believe that much, but it's a constant battle of what we can be doing better. Again, it gets back to some of the financial things that we've done around some of the equity increases, and some of the additional movement has helped. I can't say it's actually solved, because that'd be way too generous to say it's solved, but we have been making direct efforts to actually supporting those types of needs as best that we can. Again, but we don't have this unlimited supply of budget or anything to always be able to do that, but we're looking for those cases where we can. Frankly, I think it's one of the great examples of where sometimes additional heads, again, staff assembly comes up with some great ideas and some great feedback that we can actually take back to senior leadership and say, hey, here's another thing, another tool we could possibly try. Can we try this? I'd say, generally speaking, we'll try it if we can. And I know we try to be as receptive to those new ideas as much as we can. We can't do everything, but when we can find it, we'll support it. I know that wasn't the greatest answer, but I think that's the only answer I can give right now.
Thank you, JS. And some of these are tough questions, but real questions. I'll tell you, there's several about salaries and keeping up with market and how we lag. One of the questions here is, one challenge I see is that there do not seem to be great mechanisms for salaries to keep pace with market without people moving jobs. This means that people who are happy in their jobs and do not have opportunities for promotion within UCR will fall further and further behind market rate over time, even as they grow in expertise. Are there mechanisms for addressing this? And also, second part to that question is, why is the equity call now biannual when it was initially rolled out as annual?
Wow, that's a loaded question. You guys don't make it easy on me at all today. Let me say that, and as I said before, and you look at what the pandemic has done to us, and the amount of revenue that's been lost with dorms and food, and we still have to pay for new buildings that we have in terms of parking spaces that we were expecting to pay with the revenue from people buying parking permits. Well, if nobody's coming to campus, or or so much fewer people coming to campus, that's revenue that we're still paying out the money for those buildings, but we don't not getting nearly the revenue that we had that we expected in order to pay it. So it's no different than someone in an unfortunate situation where they lose their job. They have bills they have to pay, but now they don't have the income coming in, so things have to be shifted around and moved around. So when it comes to things like equity increases, it's not like we've stopped them by any means, but we've had to actually slow them down a bit because we just don't have the budget. This coming up year, we hopefully, and again, I'm saying, some of the budget things look like they're going to be favorable to us as UCR, where we're going to get some, bigger one-time funds as well as some additional ongoing funds, but those budget items have not been finally approved yet. But we're hoping that, as our budget improves, we will be able to actually improve it for all of UCR. This is really one of those things. Again, it's, we can't just create additional budget. That's just the simple reality of it. But as the budget situation actually, starts to look a little bit better, then we'll reassess and say, hey, can we move back to an annual equity call versus biannual? Again, that'll take, Jerry and Kelman, others to actually, approve that to make it happen. But we need to be back in a budget situation where we can support something like that. But the fact that we're doing it every other year is better than not at all. Some campuses don't have it at all. So we are doing what we can, and that's really what I want to stress here is that, it's not as though we believe or even for a second think, everybody's paid perfectly fine and we don't have to worry about it. That's not the message at all. We understand that there's need for, there's people that are actually stressed because of their financial ability to pay for things. We know that not everybody's paying ideally where we would want them to be paid, but we don't just have this magic source of money to actually fix it all. So that's what we're doing is, as we're able to free up budget for, or get additional budget from the state, which again, for this year, it looks like it may actually be advantageous for us. We're going to actually start reassessing to see where we can do that. That's one of my answers. Like usually I don't really care if Jerry's one or not, but darn, I wish he was here for that one. So that's my best answer that I can do without actually being a finance person right now, and trying to overcommit with that.
Thank you, JS. I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap things up.
Great.
Was there anything that stood out to you in the Deloitte report? Some of the assessments are concerning. And the second part is leadership going to have a town hall to discuss some of the findings from the Deloitte report?
Wow. So my general impressions of the survey, I can say it wasn't shocking, but it was still disappointing to read certain parts of it, just in terms of, the culture or the trust necessarily between, maybe, within central HR or central HR to some of the business partners that we work with all the time. We should all HR professionals on campus should be really working in concert with one another, because we should really be looking at things from the standpoint that we're one team, all trying to actually move and do the positive right thing for UCR. But if the HR professionals across the campus aren't on the same page, or there's conflict of some sort between us, then it's one of those things. How are we going to help you all and the staff if we can't really help ourselves get to align? And that was, I won't say just shocking, but it was really disappointing that we've fallen off someplace and we need to realign ourselves a bit better. How that happens, how culture changes. Again, there's no magic wand. This isn't Harry Potter. We can't just, zip it up. So we're going to have to work on that. That's probably my biggest takeaway from that, is that we need to figure out what's the best thing to do that way. In terms of what are we going to do to kind of talk about it more broadly through UCR, I'm not quite sure what the full plan is. Actually, we have a couple of meetings set up, I think later today or Thursday. I think it's later today, to talk about some of this within this Central Human Resources group first, and then we'll be talking about it with a couple other groups. We call the fiscal officers, as well as human resources groups across the campus, is another one of those meetings to figure out really next steps and what's the best way to socialize this. So I'll take back the idea that maybe we should have a town hall just to talk about it more formally, because again, nothing there's a secret. That's why we put it on the website, and we didn't want it to be a secret. We want people to know that, hey, there's some things here that we want to respond to, we want to address, and we want to get better at. And one of the things since I've been here, I've been trying to make sure we increase our contact with our HR folks, to make sure that we are more communicative and more on the same team, the same partnering aspects. Been trying to talk more with you all in staff assembly. I mean, again, you are staff, you're who we support. So when you have your ideas and your thoughts, we try to respond the best we can. And I think that's really what we have to continue to do. Again, I've put some things into place since I've been here to try to actually be more communicative. And if we need to do more, that's what we'll do, is do more. And this is a great one actually for Erica to speak to, because she is one of our HR partners that we don't get along with at all. So just kidding on that part. But Erica, if you wanted to comment, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I actually really appreciate my relationship with Central HR. We do talk quite a bit. But there's breakdowns when, there's priorities here, they have priorities. There's just so much going on. So we definitely, all of us, I think communication is always an area for us to continue to work on. But I feel like, I really appreciate, John, Stephen, all of the things that you've mentioned here. These have been really hard questions, and we have a lot more difficult questions that we weren't able to get to. But I feel like right now we have a very dedicated HR staff who care a lot about this campus, and that are doing everything that they can to try and move us in a positive direction in very difficult circumstances. So I can tell you as well, the HRBPs across campus are very, very strong HR leaders. So once we continue to work and build this relationship and continue to improve this communication, I think we'll continue to move in the right direction. So thanks, JS. And with that, I just want to remind everyone that this session was recorded, and we will be posting it on Facebook and our social media pages, as well as our website. So if you want to view it again, please feel free to check us out on any of those links. Before I close this out, JS or Agam, was there anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation? We appreciate everything that's been said so far.
Yeah, I want to thank JS for coming on and sharing your perspectives. JS, I know these were some difficult questions. We certainly appreciate your partnership. This is all a collaboration with you and your team. And this conversation is not over, folks. Reach out to Staff Assembly. We want to hear from you. We want to continue to build a better university for all of us. but we appreciate your partnership. Register for the staff conference that Erica mentioned. It's in exactly 2 weeks, over 23 sessions, and access this recording in a short few days, posted up on our staff assembly website. So thank you, Jess, to you and your team, and thank you, Erica, Jeff, Melanie, Brittany, and all the staff out there.
And I just had one last thing I wanted to say. For all the staff that are here, I want to say JS is probably one of the most approachable and open HR leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with. He is a very busy man, but he's very open to having conversations. So he's always accessible to you guys. If you want to, reach out, I encourage you to do so. So thanks again, everyone. We look forward to seeing you all at the staff conference. And JS, I totally cut you off. You can have the last word.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting us here for the HR team to be a part of this. We're all trying to be partners doing the right thing and the best thing for the entire campus. And the only last thing I'd say is Agam and Jeff, I wish you would have told me you were wearing suits today. I would have stepped up my wardrobe game just to look as good as you guys did. So I'm disappointed you didn't let me know, but
well, we're always trying to keep up with you, JS.
All right. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you at the staff conference. Take care and have a nice week.